Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Psicast. I'm your host, Robert Marcy, and I'm joined here with Bill Montana and Chris Walden.
How is everybody? This is Bill Montana. And we got Chris Walden. Chris, go ahead and say hello so they know your voice.
Yeah, hello. Very good to be with you guys today. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
Now, we do have something. We actually have a new product that's just starting to hit the market. Right now it's available from the gentleman himself. It's a little black, a little skull, a little tiny skull, PK skull, actually. It's about maybe an inch or so by 3/4 inch or something like that. It's pretty small. It's a little PK skull. It's got a magnet embedded in the head, towards the top of the head, and it's made by a gentleman by the name of James R. Carter, Carter. And he makes them in a couple different colors. You got the ones that he's making right now are black and white, and you can get them in a flat, matte kind of finish, or in a glossy black or white finish. And he also makes a little PK brain. And Tony I sent that one in, and Tony I has one, and says it's pretty cool. So,
Great.
But that's something new I think a lot of guys never seen before, so. And good PK stuff's getting hard to get. So.
Oh yeah.
There's not a lot of it out there anyway. So this is kind of different from some of the bizarre fans. So tonight we're on the call with Chris Walden from Austin, Texas. Is that correct, Chris?
I am in Austin, Texas. Absolutely.
So what is the magic scene like in Austin, Texas?
Austin's got a pretty good, strong magic scene. Cody Fisher is out of here, name you may have heard before. We've got Ray Anderson at Esther's Follies, who's been there for, I think going on 30 years now. Esther's Follies is a live music comedy review that's basically half illusion show. Although most audiences, I don't think, fully comprehend that there's a magic in there. It just blends so well with the entertainment. And Ray is just a wonderful, charming magician who probably could and should be touring the world doing things, but he really likes having his spot there at Esther's. And there's kind of folks around here. We got a Society of American Magicians chapter and an International Brotherhood of Magicians chapter. We have a magic auction that happens once a year and a number of things going on. So it's a pretty active community. I've been a little less involved since I started going down the rabbit hole because it's just hard for me to sit around card tricks too long.
Are the twins out your way?
Are the which?
The twins that do the balloon sculpting?
I'm not certain. It's possible that they are. I'm a little
bit. I know they go to a big magic auction every year out in Texas, and they come up to one here in Ohio.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the Austin Magic Auction is the one that they're probably talking about.
Yeah, that's probably them. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been in the balloon twisting world.
Yeah, well, they do like balloon twisting stuff. When they come up here, they usually do a little restaurant in Eaton, Ohio, and then on Thursday or Friday, then go ahead and do the magic auction all week.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the magic auction when I was getting involved in magic, the magic auction was invaluable. Being able to help out with that, I was. I guess about 18, and I'd grown up not really encountering a lot of magicians. My magicians were Bill Severn and Henry Hay, right?
Yeah.
And so I sort of ended up growing my own vision of that, and it was really interesting in the magic auctions having a chance to come into contact with so many different kinds of magic throughout. Basically, the last 100 years or so of what was being produced and what was being done, I learned a hell of a lot. being involved with all that. Something to be said for volunteering for things like that. You get to connect with a lot of stuff that way. I think my most treasured moments working with the magic auction is every once in a while the auctioneer would hand me something and say, "Go figure out what this is." And I had to go off to the side and dig it out and go, "Oh, that's clever. That's neat." And demonstrate it real quick. It's amazing all the different ways people come up with to do the same thing.
You see that in a lot of the production boxes too.
Yeah.
And frankly, some work better than others. I mean, some of them, even the ones that don't work as well, are still pretty interesting ideas, though.
It's true. Well, and I go back to the Fitzke trilogy when it comes to things like that. I think he did a real good job of breaking down general methodologies for stuff like production boxes and that sort of. I think the magic auction also helped keep me from being the sort of rabid collector of props that some people are, because you got a chance to see how similar so many of them are, and a lot more willing to just work with what you got or work with what you do. There's no magic bullet. There's not any one thing you're going to get that's going to change everything for you. The key
to the auction is just get what you like. You're going to overpay anyway.
Yeah. Now I tell you, I did get some treasures the last time I went to the auction. I don't know if you remember Mark on the Mountebank. He was at Renaissance festivals. Well, I would run into him in Texas from time to time. We'd sit down, have like that, and of course he crossed over several years ago, and they had some of his stuff there. And I managed to pick up some of that. I have his makeup case that he used since high school, which is like a very personal piece to him. It's not a magic trick or anything like that, but I swear I could do a seance with that thing. And I got a cape that he had. It was a black cape that he had made that had some ritualistic symbols on the back of it that I have, and a couple other little things like that, just personalized for him, that was very special to get hold of.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and he was remarkable. He was very serious about his craft. And had an interesting world there. Of course, Bill Palmer here in Texas is someone that I've been connected with for a while. He was one of the first magicians that I knew of when I was a kid at the Renaissance Festival. There was a period of time where Bill Palmer and David Copperfield were really the only magicians in my world.
Yeah.
That put him in a pretty high spot.
Now you knew Ed Solomon, right?
I did, yeah. Ed is partly responsible for really shoving me down the rabbit hole. I was dissatisfied with being a mainstream magician. There were a lot of things about it that was starting to get to me, and I was sort of wandering in this sort of bizarre storytelling direction. And so I said, you know, Cooney, you need to meet Ed Solomon. And I ended up reaching out to him, and he and I became very good friends. And I was when he was in hospice, I went and visited him and read letters from everybody, notes to wish him well. And that was amazing to see, just the tremendous outpouring. The thing that surprised me the most was I knew as Ed's friend that Ed understood me on a level that a lot of people didn't. And he was connected to stuff that I was connected with the way that other people didn't understand. And we were so on the same level with these ideas. And then I read notes to him from people that had that same feeling, that same attitude, but it was on completely different subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
He had this amazing way of connecting with people and being in their universe, even though they were all different universes. He was an interdimensional being. I really, he was the one that helped me finally make the break from being in just total magician world and sort of embracing this weirder path. He helped me to cross that threshold and to reshape myself. And I miss him. Oh my gosh, I miss him. There's not, every other day I think is something that I'd love to talk to Ed about. And I have to do it the hard way now.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a lot of contact with Ed?
I had some.
Yeah. He was very dedicated to storytelling, and very dedicated to being open to your imagination and open to what was possible, and not just doing the same thing over and over. And he was relentlessly sarcastic about card tricks. He got so sick of card tricks, and I kind of picked that up from him a little bit. I've gone off on card tricks quite a bit.
I think he even invented a few of them. So there was.
He invented. No, he was involved with it, but he got very frustrated that card tricks seemed to be where everybody seemed to be centering magic right now. And it's funny when I do make it to a magician gathering and people are doing pieces, you'll still find that they're 80% card tricks, and I just all I can think of is poor Ed. I'm glad he's not here to see this. At
one point, at least back in the 80s, it was, every magician was judged on his ability to do cups and balls.
Yeah. That's
when I sold my cups and balls.
In magic, that was the one that showed that you were the real deal.
Yeah, I saw that and I said, okay, these need to go.
Well, I guess it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to be an industry person, then there's certain things you got to show and certain things you got to connect with. That's one of the things when we were talking about me being on the podcast. One of the confusing things was I don't really have any magic tricks to sell or magic books to sell or anything like that. I love to connect with my peers. I love to talk about ideas. I love to have sort of industry discussions with people. But I really don't see myself as someone who's here to sell to my peers or to do anything like that. I feel a lot more comfortable connecting with the public and going in that direction.
Yeah, well, you did a lot of festivals, right?
Well, yeah. So that's been part of the journey. Is when I began, I was just trying to be a weird magician, but in that journey, I discovered this thing. You and I have talked about this a little bit. I discovered this thing I call magician voice. And the way I discovered it was interesting. This was before I was fully connected with the Museum of the Weird. I was having conversations with the owner, but I wasn't really doing anything there. And frankly, I don't think I was ready for it at that point. But my family, we went into the museum. So it was my mom, my dad, a couple of cousins, my wife, my daughter, me. We went in with a crew, and a couple other ladies ended up joining us. And there was this magician who had been doing stuff there, which kind of pissed me off at first because I thought, well, hey, what about me? Why don't you talk to me about that? But I didn't put myself forward on that, and he did. So that's the way that works. So we're looking at all the weird stuff, and he kind of lurks out of the shadows there. And there was a tarantula cage there with a live tarantula that he started using as his table. So he just dumped his stuff on the tarantula cage there, which I'm sure made the tarantula very happy. And he announced himself. I won't name him, but he announced himself and said that he was a magician after the style of Houdini, so he could show us a card trick. or he could tell us a story, or he could tell someone's fortune. So my daughter immediately asked for the story. I think she was like 6 at the time. The ladies wanted their fortune told. Nobody asked for the card trick. He was visibly deflated.
That's everything you know right there.
And he proceeded to tell the story of the monkey's paw. And so he tells a story, and he does like a quick pictorial deck readings for the ladies. And we leave, and my wife is pissed off. She is angry, and I'm confused because I mean it wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't that bad. And she said, "I cannot believe what he did. I can't believe he ruined that story." I'm like, "What?" She said, I read that story when I was in college, and it terrified me. And he told it like a magician. And I went, whoa, what does that mean? Because at this point, I still sort of consider myself in that universe. And we ended up having a 2-hour conversation about what that meant, out of which this idea of magician voice came about. And basically, what it boiled down to for her was she left nothing to the imagination. In the story, and I'm assuming that the audience is familiar with the story of the monkey's paw, a magical artifact.
They should be.
Wishes.
Yeah,
go look it up. It's a good story. But she said in that point in the story where there's the knocking on the door, that her imagination went just wild with what was down there, what was banging on that door, and she found that very frightening. And he sort of laid it out for you. He described what must have been on the other side of that door. And she enlightened me to a lot of what from her perspective was typical in the magician world. And what it all boiled down to was this sort of underlying insincerity. Hi, I'm the magician. I don't really believe in what I'm going to show you, and I don't expect you to believe it either. But let's be nice to each other for an hour, and we'll get through this bullshit together.
Yeah,
right.
It's what kills it. Yeah,
right. And I had never had it laid out in front of me in such a strong term, especially by someone who I thought was on my side. Right? And
right.
She was on my side. But she was being nice, and it really opened my eyes. And I tell you what I ended up doing, Bill, is I stepped away from magic. I put it all down, and I tried to figure out what this thing was that I had embedded in myself, and that's why I started doing the Shadow Hour podcast, which I did for 3 years. That was a paranormal podcast. It was an hour, though every once in a while we'd go over. And I would talk to psychics and mediums and UFO people and Bigfoot people and you know, all walks of the paranormal. Some of my guests were also on Coast to Coast AM, which was kind of cool. And I got to have these real conversations with them. And my goal was not to bust anybody's chops, although I was at that time a little more skeptical than I am today about some of this stuff. But it was really just to let them tell their story. And that had a profound effect on me.
Is any of that available so people can check it out still? Or?
It is, actually. I'm trying to remember the best place to find it.
Here's what to do. Here's what we'll do. After I put this video link up on YouTube, put it in the comment section below.
Okay, we'll put it in there, because I do have an archive of all of the shows. Some of them I've been going back through and sort of doing a recap of my thoughts on doing that particular show, and pulling some of that data together, but the raw archive is available. And I did about 150 interviews. Yeah,
that's good, because there's some of that stuff I'd probably like to listen to.
Well, and I tell you, what was interesting for me was the way I did the show is I wanted these people to be comfortable with me. So I would try and have a pre-show chat. I know there's guys like George Norrie and someone like that don't want to have contact with the guest before the show. But I really wanted to make sure that these people trusted me and knew that I wasn't there to get them or anything like that, that they had an idea of what the conversation was going to be. So we'd have a pre-show conversation earlier in the week, usually for about an hour or so. I would identify interesting things that they would say and go, okay, I want to try and replay that conversation. I'll ask that again. And many of them were very good at just sort of, we'd have that same conversation again, except on the air. And then generally after the show, I would give them a quick phone call afterwards to say, thank you. And we'd end up having more conversation, just chit-chatting sometimes for another hour. So I would talk for 3 or 4 hours with these people, including the 1 hour broadcast. And I got to ask them anything. And it was in an environment where they were really just sharing with me. And I got some valuable insight about how to think about it. In a way that very different than conversations I've had in other settings. And I would every once in a while ask a question that I thought was kind of challenging. And not trying to bust their chops again, but really just trying to understand. And there's a few profound things that sort of moved back into my own approach to mentalism and paranormal entertainment. One in particular was I was talking to, I think it was Erica Booser-Haney, who was a psychic that was on one of the ghost hunter shows from time to time. And I said, okay, so you're talking to Uncle Ted, and you're having this communication with the spirit, but you really seem to have problems spelling his name. What is going on with that? Why is that happening? And the way she explained it is that from her perception, that the information came to her in a series of like postcard snapshots. And so she got these sort of puzzle piece clues that she had to interpret. But the audience isn't interested in that. They don't want to feel like you're trying to understand. And so there's a certain amount of chutzpah that goes on there as you try and interpret this. And you sort of feel your way around it until you make the hit. Now, whether that's her explanation or that's her experience, I couldn't completely grasp. But what it immediately taught me was a rationale and a thinking and a mode to try to work through this kind of stuff. And why it is okay to not know something. Another medium that I talked to, I said, okay, so how do you know the difference between stuff that's coming to you psychically and things that you make up? And he said, that's a very good question, because in your mind, it seems to come from the same place. But what happens is a psychic learns not to throw things away, to retain things. And over time, you discern where that's coming from. And you know the difference. But in the beginning, it's very much about not throwing things away. Again, a beautiful gold piece of information. It went right along with the stuff that you say, that went right along with the stuff that Doc Hilford says, that Bob Caskey says, that Ken Nepper says, that all these people who have influenced me have said, that just go for it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Right? What's the worst that's going to happen if you just go with the first thing that comes into your head? And what this psychic was telling me is that is actually using your intuition. And my gosh, when I started to let go of my need to be right and draw upon this information that way, that's changed everything.
Yeah. Now, did you get to meet? Have you met Brandon Hodges out in Austin?
He and I have had some interaction, but we're not real close connection. We kind of pass by each other every once in a while, but we haven't really really hung out.
For those of you who don't know, Brandon Hodges is the guy that runs the Mysterious Planchet. He's one of the largest Ouija board collectors on the planet.
Yeah. He and I have talked about his Ouija collection, and I like him. He actually owns one of my wood Zograph boards, the Arabic board. Yeah. I gave him one. I don't have an impressive Ouija collection. I have a little bit of one.
Yeah, well, nobody has a collection like him.
Yeah. But I tell you, I think that that's
like the Dial Planchet, I think he owns 3 of the 6 that were made, and he knows where the other 3 are from Hudson Tunnel.
Wow.
I mean, it's an extraordinary collection.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had a chance to go out there yet, but I should.
You should try to get to see the collection sometime. It's been exhibited at a couple big exhibits too.
Yeah, well, I've seen some news pieces and that sort of thing with him. So yeah, I know it's impressive.
Because it's all period, real, very, I don't think anybody knows more about talking boards and planches than that guy.
Well, and I think that's important. I think that's what makes all the difference in the world on this kind of journey is and it's what made the difference with me for a lot of things. And what helped
he's
me
actually preserving a very rare aspect of, international history at this point.
Well, and I would imagine that in the right context, he could be open about what he's genuinely explored with that stuff. I can't imagine that you would collect that kind of thing and not open that door a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if he's actually, fully is a believer in that kind of thing, but because he's made some comments to both sides actually. But it's the fact that he's a really good collector of it. It's an extraordinary collection. It really is. I've seen parts of it at some of the museum shows that were online. They showed photos of it, and they're like, oh my God.
Sure.
Where'd he find it? There's like maybe one of those left. There it is.
I love collecting or connecting with all that kind of stuff. Someone told me recently that some of Aleister Crowley's ceremonial stuff is going on display somewhere, and there's part of me that goes, wow, wouldn't it be awesome to be close to that? And then there's a part of me that wonders, or is it gonna look kind of like the particle accelerator did from Ghostbusters when I saw it up close and saw all the gaff tape? Is it going to have a little more paper mache than I expect?
Well, you never know until you go see it.
I know, and that is a goal for me, is to be hands-on.
Yeah, but anytime, I think anytime you can go see a major collection of anything by like one of the premier collectors of the planet in whatever field it is, whether it's art or paintings or museum artifacts or whatever, go. You're going to learn something new.
Well, and be willing to go to see collections that are sort of outside of your core interest too.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll find when you get with someone who lives and breathes something that they can help you experience it in a way unlike anybody else.
Yep.
And you will walk away with some kind of a connection to it, even if it doesn't become your thing.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole point, though. Because in our line of work, it is an experience. We are providing a service, but it's an experiential service. And when you see the passionate, like the high-end collectors, you see that experience being shared, and it's very real.
Right. Stephen King, in his talk about being a good writer, he emphasizes the importance of being a strong reader, too. That in order to be someone who can create a good written experience for someone, you have to have your own good written experiences by other people. And he says that he still enjoys reading. He still reads a lot, and he sees that as a core part of his competency, is connecting with these experiences that other people create.
Yeah, and I think that's important,
I think
because we can draw from those other experiences and add new things into what we do now. And a lot of times we don't even need to vocalize them. You know, they don't need to be a vocal addition. They could be just a simple visual addition.
I remember
add elements to the whole.
Well, when I learned, I went into a Weird Al Yankovic concert. And for whatever reason, I was really in a mode of paying attention to the production. I mean, I enjoyed the music and all that, but I was also trying to pay attention. How does Weird Al put on the show?
Yep.
And I learned a lot of things about how he used his pre-show music, what he did with the lighting. And obviously it's not him. He's got people helping him to create this production. But I learned a lot about all of the different things they used to create the context of that experience, to have the continuity, to keep the audience engaged while they did a costume change and all of that kind of thing. I learned a lot about putting on a show. And I think that a lot of the times when I've allowed myself to be engaged in other experiences and be involved in other things, like doing a play, as opposed to just what I think my central art is, I think every performer needs to, from time to time, do someone else's show, where someone else writes your lines, someone else hooks you up. You're just there to help make that show go. You're not in charge of everything. You don't have to think of everything, because you learn so much about yourself and so much about other ways of doing things when you get in a mode where you're in the middle of all that kind of support. I love every time I get to do a play or something like that. It's very time consuming.
Yeah, or even to the point of just working on something. We're working with somebody else on their show.
Oh yeah.
A stagehand or a porter or something, because you're going to learn little nuances.
Well, and you also when you get into those kinds of collaborations, if you get folks that will really collaborate with each other, you can add your energy into what they're doing and make their sound better, their lights better, their whatever better, depending on what you have to offer. And later on, you should be open to letting them offer that same stuff in for you.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an equal trade. Sometimes it's not. I mean, I've done a little both, or whatever. But
being willing to be supportive of someone else and just really be in the background, I think you learn. I think you learn from that no matter what, no matter where the performer is in the hierarchy, if you will.
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter, in the long run.
But I love working with theater production techniques, what you can do with a setting and lights and sound and that kind of thing. And a lot of the circumstances that I'm in, I don't really get to fully engage all that stuff at this stage. Never say never, right? A lot of the things.
That's only because the venues are currently working. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the venues you're currently working don't have that kind of production value.
Keep it sharp when I can, and it's funny that just your awareness of that will, I'm always intrigued by performers that get confused when the light's in their eyes. When you're in some settings, in order for the audience to see you, you don't get to see the audience, and that's the trade-off there. And if you're standing there with your hand in front of your face and all that, so you can see them, that's the kind of thing you got to get used to. But it's also made me aware of lighting conditions in any room that I'm in. To make sure that I'm in the light, that I rearrange things so I'm taking advantage of whatever conditions there are. And
that's why they always view the stage from the audience's point of view.
And be willing to rearrange things. if you had that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, your point of view, I mean, at the end of the day, if the audience can't see what's going on or see what you're trying to set up, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But if you go out and sit in like the left side of the audience, then over on the right side, in the center, you get a couple different perspectives. You know where the bad problems are.
Right. Well, and I've seen that with a lot of the stuff that you do, you're very aware of the production values of the setting. You have a lot of things that you surround yourself with that create the context of what you're doing with people that have nothing to do. You're not going to pick them up and use them as prop in the show, but they create that context, that understanding. It's basically a stage setting is what you're creating there. That goes beyond, imagine if you saw cats just on a blank black stage. I mean, you could still do it, but it's not nearly as wonderful as seeing all the giant trash and everything like that.
There's an attitude that, on the stage, the props convey meaning through, almost a philosophical view of the object itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that object could be used to, it's sitting on the stage, no big deal. I don't ever touch it. I don't ever look at it. I don't use anything for it. That object's there to enforce another object. That takes that object I'm actually using, turning into a miracle. It's because of the other object, not because of the first object.
When you study what production designers do and scenic designers in films, for example, I don't remember what film I was watching, but I was watching some behind-the-scenes stuff. I love watching the commentaries and documentary stuff about what goes into a movie. And the scenic designers were talking about all the little things they had done to get props and little doodads in this room that sort of told the story of this character's life. Nothing was pointed out. It was all just there. And then the actor said, I walked on the set, and it was amazing because there were all these little things. And it really helped the actor immerse himself in the role. And it spoke to the audience, even though the audience wasn't aware that they were picking up on that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of times those kind of props, the audience is completely oblivious to it, but yet it hits them in a psychological state or a subconscious state, and they help understand more about what is actually occurring in the story.
Well, and it hits the performer in the same way. When you surround yourself with those things, it changes your vibration.
Yeah,
it puts you in
a lot of times,
mode.
yes.
And there's a real mode to that where your vibration is literally changing, but there's a psychological mode of that where when you start getting into this context and leaving aside all of the other things that you're working with, all the other things that you're worried about, this ritual that you're going through pulls you into the character. Now, in the case of some of the stuff that you work with, and I think I do as well, and hopefully some of our listeners do too, some of the real stuff that we have that we connect with, that has a literal change in the vibration if you're open to it. You really do surround yourself with things that change your energy. And I think that's interesting. I didn't used to believe that sort of thing until I started doing it.
And then you started understanding the whole concept as a whole.
Well, yeah, and I guess that is the thing that surprised me the most about this journey is, when you learn how to make a coin disappear, doing some kind of a coin pass. The smart performer will practice putting the coin in the hand and look at what that looks like and what it feels like, muscles do and all that, so that when you go to emulate it, you can be as true as you possibly can to what you normally do, and then everything blends. And what what really changed my journey, and this was some of the stuff that I don't think Ed directly challenged me to do it, but he encouraged my curiosity, definitely, was to explore magical methodology, to explore occult methodology, and not just sort of read the skeptic's guide to fortune telling, but really get into something and really try it, really work a magical ritual and see what happens. And whether anything happens or not, or whether you believe it, you did anything or not.
Because I mean, like the Skeptic's Guide to Fortune Telling, he maybe did 3 pages of research to write the whole book. It's ridiculous.
Sure.
It's crap.
And what I found every time I dug into something was it wasn't what I was told. Was the first thing, and then
from the skeptic, the skeptic told you one thing, and that ain't it at all.
Right, and then as I involved myself in some of this stuff, things happened, right? And I don't know if that's something we want to get into or not, but
we'll get into that.
It changed my perspective. I had people come to me and tell me, you're doing things. You are being a magical person. You are working. You are manifesting, and I didn't know what to do with that information for a while. It confused me for a while, and then I became a lot more accepting of it, and open to the point that I'm okay if someone wants to actually do a magical working. I don't need special effects. There are situations where, for what people want to explore and experience, I don't need to do anything, right? And for the outside observer who's got one view of what this is supposed to be, it just maybe seems hokey or ridiculous to them, but I felt things. I've gotten feedback that I've had effects on things, and so for me the whole what I thought was creating a character ended up being sort of a change in my path on some level.
I mean, one of the programs we put out last year was with Mystic Alexandra. It's called Moments of Silence. We're actually using silence. We're doing nothing, zero. Just standing there, quiet. Extremely strong if used right. If it's used wrong, you look like if you use it right, it's very powerful. But a lot of these kind of things that we're talking about take a certain type of performer focus, because you have to be in the moment to be able to pull them off.
Right. Well, and I think doing them in a performance situation is kind of challenging, right? You definitely got to be in a certain mode, but I think that there's a lot of these kinds of things that we can experience. Something that I do fairly regularly now are different types of cleansing rituals for people. And I do them for donations. To me, I see that as kind of working. That someone needs it, they'll do it, and I treat that, I guess you'd say, more like a ministry than something else. And that's what makes me comfortable there. Who knows what the future holds? But basically, the way that began was I'd studied some of this kind of stuff. I tinkered with it for a while just for myself. I'd gone through it and saw that, okay, that does make me feel better. That makes the space feel better to me. And, whether it's coincidence or magic, who cares, as long as it works. And so that was just a personal thing for me. And then someone said, could you please do this for me? I feel like I really need this, and I really want you to do it because I think you get it. And you're like, sure, I guess. Why not? And then you do it, and something tangible happens there. And I think that is just a huge experience that people need to have. They need to do some of this stuff for real.
And then, and then some of the stuff you find out later, even though you did it for real the first time, there is a methodology, and if you repeat it, you might be able to do it again.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets tricky, because you got to break it down into some really abstract thought. And then it comes out, then you have a professional, fringe effect.
Well, and there are texts out there. I think one of my favorite texts on magic, with a K, if you will, is Real Magic by an author named Isaac Bonewitz. One of the first occult authors that I really sunk my teeth into, and okay, that makes sense to me.
And Norman McGill put out a brilliant work on Real Magic.
Well, he breaks down the pattern of what goes into a magical ritual. Mm-hmm. And he shows how this pattern is repeated in pretty much every religious ceremony on the planet, and even non-religious ceremonies where people are trying to make something happen. And you eventually go, oh, okay, so that's a thing. That's a human thing. And there's stuff like that out there that it doesn't teach any trickery, but it teaches you some perspectives and ways of thinking about things. And whether you decide that you want to, put on your robes and do rituals in the backyard, I mean, that's your thing. But having some level of appreciation for that changes your whole what you give off about it. Believe it or not, that magician voice comes out when you're just kind of bullshitting your way through something.
Yep.
And if you're basing all of your experience on doing a magic ritual on an old Hammer horror film that you watched, and you haven't dug into it any deeply, people can tell when you're faking. People can also tell when you've done this before. And I remember one instance where I was doing an event with some folks. We were going to show the movie Witchboard, and I was going to do some spirit messages. Mm-hmm. And the person putting on the event started saying, Saul's going to do and I guess I should say my performance persona is Saul Ravencraft. And that's become this whole other part of my universe there. But I went ahead.
Now, is Saul the one that works at the Museum of the Weird? For a little context here.
Saul is the one who works at the Museum of the Weird, and he does all the metaphysical festivals. Chris is primarily the manager and tech guy now. I do very little stuff under my own name because the kinds of things I'm working with, I recognize I need to draw some big, heavy lines between that and parts of my personal world. I'm sure you can appreciate that. And I also needed for myself psychologically to be able to sort of put on a mantle that would allow me to go further than I could otherwise. When you're confirmed in the church, or you there's various kinds of experiences that you'll have where part of your journey is to take on a new name. And in the beginning, I thought Saul was just kind of like a character name for me, and ultimately it became a sort of a confirmation name almost.
Mm-hmm.
Which is but anyway, we're going to do this thing. We're going to show Witchboard. We're going to do some spirit messages in the middle. She's told everyone, "Oh my God, Saul is going to be doing a seance, and it's going to be awesome." And people start chiming in about what it is that they're looking for there. And I'm like, we need to do this for real. They're not looking for a show anymore.
No.
Once
it gets to the point of seance, the show is over.
Right.
Ooh.
Right. Well, and so what we did, what I decided to do, was to just let go of my need to be the showman there. I mean, there's showmanship always when you're working with a group, But
even in seance, there's showmanship.
But
even in seance,
there's showmanship. Well, sure, obviously. But what I moved away from was the idea of doing the show, right, and helping to show this experience. So I bought one of my older talking boards. I have a 1915 fold board that we used, we did a Ouija session, and there was no trickery, there was no gaffes, no forcing of anything. I basically tried to recreate the conditions of doing a 19th century talking board session. And we cast a circle around the participants, we grounded them and shielded them, and we used real techniques to do things. And there were like 3 confirmed hits where people felt like they made a connection with someone they wanted to connect with. And that wasn't me. That was bigger than me. And that's what I'm finding as well as I bring these ideas of trying to use real intuition and doing, say, mentalism performance. And sometimes I connect with stuff that's bigger than me.
Yeah, when you look at that, a genuine type article of seance, even though maybe some of it may be staged psychologically, as in inside the seance mind for me, there's an aspect there that is very unique, actually, and what comes across is a level of believability you can't get with a spirit bell or some other kind of, staged gaffe. Because you're too busy thinking about when to push the button instead of being actually in the moment with the spectators, or in this case, the sitters.
I tell you, the first time that I had an encounter with a connection that was real, even though I wasn't trying to be real, it was at the museum, and I was, one of the things I do very, very regularly, I've done it 1,000 times over the last year through the museum, is Cassidy's Name in a Place. Just strong, solid, straightforward mentalism, and I like it. I've gotten very, very comfortable with it. I found my own rhythm and everything within it. But what I always try to do is I try to dance around the whatever it is that they have. If it's a name, I try to reach into what kind of elemental vibration am I getting about this person? What kinds of things am I just occur to me about this person? I just kind of bring them out, or the same with the place. And I'll hit on things that I don't expect to hit on, and have an effect. And so I was getting a little bit of a connection like that with this one young lady. And then I said the person's name, and she began to cry. Cry is an understatement. She began to keen. She exploded into a wave of emotion, wailing, and it freaked me out. It was like, oh my God, everything I've been told about this is true. I just broke her, right? I was terrified of what had happened, and trying to.
We keep telling them that stuff's going to happen, and they don't pay attention. They think, oh no, that can't happen. That's just all bullshit. Yeah.
Well,
they look like
but
bullshit
here's
to you.
What happened. Because I was in that moment of panic, and her friends are looking at her. They're looking back at me like, you bastard, right? And I'm trying to figure out what to do, because I didn't ask her for a dead person's name or anything like that. I just said, think of a person, right? So, and she stops and she says, no, thank you. I'm okay. Thank you. And I stopped. I didn't want to I just wanted her to help me understand what was going on here. And she explained to me that she had a high school friend that had committed suicide. And she had always worried whether or not he was okay. And for whatever reason, she decided that what I said about him, I picked up on some details of him, and the fact that I got his name was proof to her that he was all right. And she had been carrying that with her for years.
Yeah, so you've relieved her of a burden, but at the same time, you've taken a big risk.
Well,
we're doing like traditional mentalism type stuff. I mean, in seance work, that's pretty much expected.
And see, that's the thing that I've had to embrace here. Back in my magician voice days, if anyone started to have an actual experience, I could toss in a joke and diffuse that. Now that I've opened myself to the idea that people may actually have real experiences through what I'm doing, and that some of that may get a little bit bigger than me, I have to be responsible for it, and I have to respect it.
Yeah, because there's a point where the effect, even though you're doing a gimmicked effect, transforms itself into something very real. And you can't just tell them that was all a trick, that was all pre-show. No, just shut up.
Right, and you have to.
You went into it. You already know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and see, that's the thing that's been interesting to me, because when I ask for a name, I say you could think of someone that you know, or somebody famous. It could be somebody fictional, right? Just someone you can visualize. Okay, that's what I tell them. All right. And that should, in general, give you a lighthearted response, right? But
not always.
They think of their child that died a month ago. They think of their grandfather whose funeral they came for. They think of all of these really heavy personal things because that's what they need to think about. That's their decision, and they need to think about that, and I've got to honor it. And I tell you that has been one of the biggest transformations for me in all of this, is to be able to allow people to have their own experience and not need to control it, not manipulate it into what I need it to be, but to know when it's time for me to take a back seat to their experience and let it be whatever it is. And that gets genuinely mystical sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're someone that cannot appreciate that maybe you want to pursue other approaches to the entertainment. If you're going to conjure up the demons, you got to be willing to face them. And if you're going to call upon big stuff, old stuff, powerful stuff, you can't run away.
No, you're pretty much stuck in the moment.
You gotta be the wizard at that point.
Yeah, I was doing a lecture on mystic energy and stuff, and I was passing out real, sane relics and stuff. Now, one of the relics I passed out was a little card with a piece of grave dirt from Mary Farron, which is the American stigmatic. She had all the wounds of Christ, the whole nine.
Oh yeah,
yeah. This is a powerful. I don't even like touching this thing. I feel like I could get beat in the head with it. She was a nun, so I feel like every time I touch the thing, I get hit in the head because I'm a scumbag at times, or at least in the opinion of the nun, scumbag. Bam, hit with a ruler.
Yeah, okay.
And I say, this is very strong. Don't take it out of the case because you'll get smacked in the head by a nun. And then I passed out a couple other relics of first class of saints. One was Pope Pius X. And I'm talking about these people. She had all the wounds of Christ. I'm going through the wounds of Christ. And this lady she gets to the relic near her, right? She goes, I'm smelling roses. I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Because everybody that smelled the wound, or when she bled, the stigmatic blood, it smelled like roses.
Sure.
Yep, there it was. There's a miracle right there. Have a nice day, folks.
Yeah.
And then I had to explain what that was about, and that was actually a genuine miracle. She was smelling roses.
Well, and it's
AKA her name was Little Rose. Very, very bizarre. Like, well, folks, we just witnessed a miracle.
Well, and I think it's an interesting part of the journey to allow yourself to be open to the possibilities of things. You know, back when I was when I was a mainstream magician and I knew everything, it was so easy to just go, yeah, if I had been there, I could have solved that. You're just not very observant. You know, you just needed someone smarter than you there to witness that. And
then when you actually witness it, you know it's completely different.
Well, and when you have an experience like that, you recognize that, okay, maybe some of this other stuff that people tell me is not as crazy as I think it is. People have their own experience. And I tell you, I'm sure you've experienced this, that once you get into this and once you start connecting with once your vibration changes, I keep using that word, I know, but to me, that the vibration is what it's all about. There's harmony, and there's discord, and there's connection, and there's disconnection, and that's what really makes everything go. But when your vibration starts to change, people start to treat you differently, and you don't know why. When I started getting deeper into sort of an occult perspective of things, I had people out of the blue call me as a pagan, which was their circle, and I didn't even know they were pagan. It had never come up. They just started going, "Oh yeah, you're one of us," and you know, I wasn't doing anything. They just kind of felt it. People would start telling me ghost stories and things like that out of the blue for no apparent reason. I wasn't soliciting it. The weirdest, when I was traveling, this was when I worked for IBM. I was traveling in China. 23-hour flight, sitting in coach.
It's a ball buster.
Guy climbing over me to get to the bathroom and all that. I mean, it's just messy. And of course, when you do it an international flight like that, you get there at like 9 a.m. or some ungodly hour. It always works out that way. And your hotel room's not ready, and you can't go to sleep. You know, so you got to kind of keep yourself going. So I, you know, finally got settled. I went down to the little bar in this hotel in Shanghai, and out of the blue, the bar manager starts telling me this story about how his father died a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. And he said, yeah, I wasn't able to go. And last time I was there, I was driving, I saw him in the rearview mirror, and he's telling me all this stuff. And I'm not sure if he's telling me that he actually saw his father following him, or that he thought he had a vision of his father following him. I'm just here to have a beer, right? That's all I said. May I have a Guinness? Right? And he's unloading this, and I'm listening and sipping my beer, and he says, what do you think that means? And inside I go, why the hell are you asking me? But I tried to say something comforting about it, and acknowledge his concerns, and something kind of non-committal, because I really didn't know what it meant. But there was something about me that had changed that caused people to start opening this stuff up. And I tell you, if you are trying to change your path from more mainstream magic into some of the weirder stuff, one of the signs that you're getting there is people will start just unloading stuff on you and opening up to you with stuff. And if you don't like it, if you can't take that, maybe that's not your thing. For me, I'm fascinated when someone connects with me like that. I've gotten to the point where I really welcome it, because I learn something from every encounter like that.
And sometimes it's just really a method of the way you're going to learn it, you know, because you said, I want to learn this, and then the universe is going to teach you how to learn this.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Which is completely different than, you know, you're not going to find some of the stuff in a book on magic.
Well, and I tell you, that was the biggest revelation for me. Like most people with a magic bug, when I moved into the directions of mentalism and bizarre, I got into relentless study. I got hold of everything that I could get hold of. I read the Animan and the Corinda, and I got hold of the everything that I could find that seemed to be a good connection.
And the other people, the other people, the magic wealth hated you. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I didn't necessarily share with them, but one of the things that I kept seeing repeated over and over in different ways, but I couldn't understand it until I did it, was that for a lot of this stuff, it really doesn't matter what you do. You need to do it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you use little pieces of paper or some kind of a gadget thing, or if you're just holding someone's hand and going to whatever occurs to you. It doesn't matter. All the techniques in the world don't really do anything for you until you do it. And when you do it, stuff comes up that the techniques kind of go out the window on some of it. And you can't experience and you keep trying to find that perfect peak, that perfect technique, that perfect way. What's that way that I'm going to reveal this thought, I'm going to learn this thought, I'm going to have this interaction that is just going to be amazing. And the only thing that happens there is you do it until the point that you let go of it. And that's when the real stuff happens.
Yeah, because the whole what's the best of this field, the best Swami or the best Imped, that's all nonsense.
It's whatever works for you, and that's not the answer that people want to hear. I've got a few techniques that I want to play with, and I keep threatening to slip a few other things in. In the museum, my time is very tight, so I always end up just doing what I do. But it's
that's only because of venue restriction. I mean, you have time restriction.
Right.
If you didn't have a time restriction, your show would be like my show, 4.5 hours.
Well, last night I did get to do that. I had a show, the Cross Time Cabaret, that I do with a buddy of mine, and it's a variety show. We had a guy doing some dramatic reading of Lovecraft, and we had a beautiful lady singing, and I did some of my paranormal entertainment. And my buddy Russ said that he was talking to someone who had sort of been with us through the whole run over the last, I guess, 3 years now, of doing this, about once or twice a quarter. And he said, because I end up doing, about 20, 25 minutes or so altogether, broken up a little bit. And, I talk about changing the conditions. The microphone was inconvenient. Decided I didn't need a microphone in the room. I know how to project well enough for that room. The stage was inconvenient. I went down the middle of the tables. We did everything together. And I just changed all the rules to whatever it needed to be. And I was also very comfortable with the material and with the attitude and what I am and who I am and what I'm doing. And Russ said that this guy commented on how much of a difference there was for me and what I was doing in our shows over the last couple of years of this. And I feel like what I was doing there was simpler than the stuff I tried to do earlier on. But I'm much more open to connecting with people. And then the thing that happens with that, and this was another sign for me that I was doing it right when I started to change, is when I did magic tricks. After I did something, someone would come up to me and go, "Ooh, how'd you do that? Do that again. Do something else," right? When this vibration started happening, I'd do something, people come up, they'd look around and go, "Let me tell you what happened to me." Right? Yep. And after we did the show, we did some fun stuff. It was all good stuff. I ended up having a 20-minute conversation with a couple about exploring alternative spiritual paths. because they're kind of opening the doorway, and they could see that I already knew something. And my goodness, I never got that after the SpongeBob.
Well, yeah, that's because you're now connecting with your audience on a audience. You're focused on your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. When your entire focus is on your audience's experience with you and you with them, the whole thing changes. Most of the street magic guys are all focused on themselves, and nothing's going to change.
Well, and I tell you, it's changed my mode. One of the things that I didn't recognize as a part of what created Magician Voice was that need to manipulate and control, to have complete control over the circumstances. I'm moving much more into a place where I'm open to where the audience wants to be, and that I'm okay. I don't feel like I have to tell them what this is going to be. That we can create some context, but if someone's moving in this direction or the flow feels like it goes in that direction, that I don't have to fight to keep everything according to my agenda. That I'm more willing and able than I've ever been to let someone else sort of pull us in a direction that's more useful to them, more meaningful to them. Now, obviously, that's not going to work in a big ticketed theater show or something like that. You got to do the thing. But when you're
in small venues, that's the way to go, because you're going to engage with the audience, they're going to engage with you, and then you're going to go with the flow.
And I think that every time I've tried to control and manipulate, it's gone to hell.
Yeah, it goes bad.
Every time I've opened myself to whatever this is going to be, it's been interesting. It's also interesting to move into a mode where people's response is not laughter and applause.
Yeah, it's an unusual thing, isn't it?
Most of the times after I finish what I'm doing at the museum, even though we've spent about 10 minutes doing the entertainment side outside of the tour stuff,
right.
After I'm done, I can feel that it impacted them. But there's just this moment of, whoo. There's not applause or anything like that. They liked it.
There's no applause when they think it's real.
Yeah. And I love that connection now. It disturbed me at first, but I love it now, and I love even more when that moment of thoughtfulness leads into someone wanting to share something personal with me, or ask a question that goes deeper, or anything. And people open up after that, and. My goodness. I remember a blatant example. You're talking about pissing off magicians. So I did some demo of some of the seance stuff I was doing at an October SAM meeting in Austin several years ago, after I had done a show for, we'd done like a dozen shows in a venue, and so I wanted me to share some of that. And so we did that, and then, of course, after autograph, and all the magicians had already gone to the restaurant with the servers in little shorts. So we got there, and they were all full, and they were clearly sessioning for the ladies. And I went, wow. Well, you guys, you look like you're already almost done with your food and everything. We'll sit at this table next to you. So I didn't sort of pull myself into that. So we're sitting there. One of the guys that was helping me out was a card guy, and server came up, and he said, "Let me show you something." And she's like, "Sure." So he is doing the card trick, and she takes a card. And I don't think he forced it, but it ended up being a Queen of Hearts. And she showed it around. I looked at it and went, "Oh, well, that's interesting." And he did the trick, and he revealed the card, and it was a great revelation. The card, well, yes, it was. And then she immediately turned to me and said, "Why did you say that was interesting?" And I basically did a one-card reading on what I felt about the Queen of Hearts in relation to her. And then she brought other servers over to have me do readings for them. And she walked away. She was like, "That's so awesome!"
Yep.
And she had completely forgotten about him. And she walked away and turned to me and said, "You asshole."
Right. Tells you everything you need to know about card tricks, man.
But it's funny how when you start to make that connection, how obvious it is what the connection is. And I'm still trying to figure out what the barrier was that I got past that made it not obvious to me. And I think part of it is just we kind of get wrapped up in the pattern of what a magic show is supposed to be. I mean, the satisfaction that I was experiencing with magic at the time was this sort of unwritten contract that first, none of this is supposed to be really serious, but also unless you're a child, your job is to figure out what I'm doing, and my job is to fool you.
That's a stupid approach.
And if you're a child, I would walk up when I was doing table magic and stuff like that. I'd walk up to a table, and there would be, the mother would be there, and she'd go, "Look, Timmy, he's gonna do magic." And I'm like, "Oh God."
Oh, I hate that. I really hate that, especially if I'm about to do something serious, like a serious mentalism thing. Then they call their kids around like, "Why? Why is he doing this thing? He's going to do a magic trick for you." No, I'm not.
Right. And then they sort of wink at you. Don't worry. I know this is stupid, but I'll play along. I'll keep you good. We'll fool these kids, right? And of course, it was always fun when you actually did one of the very four-letter words because you really got them. Yeah. But I discovered that sort of attitude just infiltrated the whole interaction that I was having as a magician. And that wasn't what I was wanting to do with people. That's what led me toward the bizarre and the mentalism and that kind of thing. But even further than that, I mean, I see plenty of mentalists and people doing bizarre that are still using their magician voice. They still really want you to have an experience here.
Well, look at Tony Andruzzi. I mean, one day he's doing a magic conference, and the next day he's out doing a pagan conference.
Well, and Andruzzi, it's funny that you mentioned Andruzzi because I've talked to Bill Palmer about Andruzzi a lot because Bill knew him when he was Tom Palmer.
That was
his comedy and that kind of stuff.
Prior to Masculine to Mage, yeah.
Right, and then I talked to Jim Magis, who did the biography on Andruzzi, which I also read, and I tell you, I related a lot to. I mean, there's aspects of Tom Palmer, especially Andruzzi, that are just off the charts for me. All right, there's a crazy person in there on some level that I respect. But I'm not that. All right? But at the same time, there were several aspects to his story and his and his need to disconnect and reconnect that I completely understood.
I mean, have you heard the stories about them at the first invocation and second invocations?
I've heard bits and pieces of it. I really wish I could go back in time and experience those. Yeah,
where Tony Andruzzi, Brother Shadow, and Charles Cameron all laying around drunk, naked in the pool at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I love it.
Yep.
But Andruzzi embraced this concept of transformation. He knew, for whatever reason, that in order for him to be successful on his life path, he needed a do-over. He needed to become a new person that was his person.
And he did. Tom Palmer, Masculine to Mage, and Tony Andruzzi, he did 3 times.
Exactly. And I think the masculine mage was sort of his transitional point.
I remember a friend of mine said, I was talking to one of the older magicians, and he said, he was talking about meeting, Tony and Drew's. He says, "Hey, how you doing, Tom?" Tom says, "I'm Tony now."
Well,
he became the other entity. I mean, he became the other, whatever. Tom was dead. He's now Tony. I mean, that's just that drug.
Well, I totally get that. There's a lot of people in my world that only know me as Saul Ravencraft, and I'm totally okay with that.
Because at some point,
I remember. Say it again.
At some point, we are our other identity.
Well, yeah.
Because there's no character. I mean, the character idea, the idea of developing this magic character just goes away, and we become that thing.
And I don't think that's something to be afraid of. I know that it's often depicted as kind of a crazy thing, but you don't know you're crazy on the inside, right? No, but I think that having that, if your goal is to change your past, if your goal is to change your connection, if you're really trying to become something, why would you back away from it when it's actually happening? I think you embrace it at that point. Not everybody can come with you on that journey. And every once in a while you have people that delight in going, "I know who you really are." Right? You can't fool me. I know who you really are. A friend of mine was talking to Max Maven early on in his trance. Well, not early on, but he'd sort of moved into the Max Maven mode and embraced it quite a bit. And my friend said, "So I'm not sure what to call you. Do I call you Phil? Do I call you Max?" And he looked at him and said very dryly, "Phil doesn't live here."
Yeah, because I think Max, I think his name's actually Max Maven now legally.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing to know yourself, to know your path, to the point that you can know Phil doesn't live here anymore. Tony doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's okay. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. And I will say that I think that it's perfectly fine to have a character, make it a strong character, and then leave that character in the box while you go do your other stuff. But I also completely understand when your experience takes you in a direction where you've got to you do need to evolve. You need to move from being the caterpillar to being the moth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, that's pretty much a stage that's reserved for the truly hardcore in our field.
Yeah, and it will change a lot of things for you and a lot of people that are in your world. But remember, some of the people that can't deal with you anymore are replaced by people that you never knew you needed, and they change everything.
Yeah, and then reading. You can go back to read the old Tom Palmer stuff. It's excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the Tony Andruzzi stuff or the Masculine Domain stuff, but it is really quite good.
I would also say that for me, one of the things that helped was to let go of always trying to read other people's magic texts and to actually read magical books, to connect with guys like Terry Pratchett and Stephen King and Neil Gaiman and Wes Craven and other people in what we think of as being other art forms. But I mean, I love the fact that Neil Gaiman can create a world that has magic that is completely real, and he can take me so far into it that there's no question that all of that is true. And
that comes from once you tune into these other alternative realities. We'll call them that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to pull from those realities into this reality, and they're going to merge together. And there's a really interesting thing that happens when that occurs. When your perspective, for one, changes.
When I knew that I was going to make these changes, Buddy and I sat down and we went through a process where we called creating my own universe. We were going to do it as kind of a Tolkien exercise. We were going to sort of define what my universe was like that my character lived in. And one of the first questions he asked is, he said, "Is magic real?" And of course, I was still very much on the traditional magician point of view, and like, well, But after talking about it for a little while, we went, well, no, magic has to be real because theatrically, that's a lot more interesting.
Well, yeah, because the whole idea of fake magic really didn't come about until the whole James Randi Psychops thing.
Yeah.
So, that was an agenda somebody else was pushing.
Yeah. And we made a number of decisions about that kind of thing. And I think that's a valuable exercise to sort of examine you get to make whatever universe that you want when you're creating.
I mean, a classic psychological example of that is to look at the Philip experiment from the University of Toronto. A group of guys sat down and created a ghost.
Right.
The apparition of that ghost is still seen at the University of Toronto today.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? They manifested a ghost.
Right. And
what an extraordinary thing.
Well, and I think there's a lot of beauty in that. I mean, there's all kinds of things mixed up in it. There's psychology and there's manifestation, and there's when you're trying to solve it as a problem, I think it gets very frustrating and messy. But when you just look at it as it's told, as it's experienced, and there's actually footage of these people on Toronto television where they said, we're going to try and contact Philip here in the studio. And stuff happens, and it's weird. It's wonderful.
Yeah, because I remember talking to Dr. Spector, who works at the University of Toronto on another name. I had said, is the original report file still available at the library, at the University of Toronto? Do they keep the records? With a detailed account of how the experiment, they got some of it, the original collection's missing of all the documented archives. But I was like, if that still exists, dude, that's worth reading.
Agreed. And
he's got access to that department, so I was going to say, hey, if that turns up,
we should be looking for that. I would be much more interested in connecting with a lot of that kind of stuff than another billet switch.
Yeah, because something really did go down there.
Something really did go down there. And one shouldn't be threatened by that.
No, one should be fascinated by that and try to, explore those concepts, because those concepts, for a bizarre magic guy, that's a pretty strong concept. Now, Europe's done an experiment similar to it. A couple of places have done experiments, and the same results are coming up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, they are manifesting something. I mean, now we don't know what that something actually is, and it doesn't really matter. Let's just call it a ghost. But it's interesting.
Well, eventually people will do this on every continent, and then Cthulhu will rise, and we'll all be eaten.
But, is it a process of our imagination, or is it a process of we are manifesting a reality? And then a few years later, you got the emergence of quantum physics, interdimensions, multi-dimensions, and everything else is starting to arise. So there's something extraordinary about that whole time period when that experiment went down. Everything just started blowing up.
This may make me sound like an underthinker, but I will admit that where I am right now is I spend so much of my time with those kinds of things trying to figure it out. And since I've gone further down this journey, I'm much more interested in the experience than the reasons behind it. And so I have a lot of things like that I'm certainly interested in the possibilities of what causes it to happen. But it doesn't matter to me why it happens. The fact that it happens is what I delight in. And how do I get as close to that as I possibly can? And sometimes I think trying to understand it gets in the way of having the experience.
Yeah, to a certain level, but I also think that if one can figure out those methods, they should be, made available if necessary, because those are some of that stuff is pretty high-end shit.
Yeah.
And I got a couple hundred hours of just audio programs on that, and about 10,000 pages of writing on those subjects.
Well, sure, and I don't disagree that when we get access to the tools that we can do that. But I also think that there's that sometimes it's okay to not know, and that you don't have to solve all the problems.
Well, I mean, there's I've spent decades examining certain problems like that. Certain experiences I've had. For you, I still got nothing.
That's your mode, right?
Yeah, but I mean, but what I'm saying is, I've had experiences where I'm still trying to examine what exactly happened. I still got nothing.
But I think that it's also important to recognize that someone else coming up in this realm who looks at you and sees how focused you are on solving these problems thinks, oh, well, that's what I have to do. I need to go dig into this, and if I'm not trying to figure out the answer for that, then I'm not a player. And people have different modes.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, I archive my knowledge of what I've learned, for a guy 50 years from now. When he discovers the Bill Montana archive, he'll be like, oh, my God, there it is.
Yeah.
We can burn these goddamn sponge balls and tell some magicians to kiss my ass.
Well,
but if it wasn't recorded or archived, nobody would know these methods.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I do think it's important for everybody who does make connections with that to record, and I think it's important to be curious.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I also think that people have different modes, and like for example, one of the things that I gained out of my dealing with the magician community is one of the things that showed that you were making it was when you started selling stuff to other magicians, when you had tricks people wanted to buy and lecture tours and that kind of thing. And there was a part of me that was trying to figure out, how do I get there from here? And then one day I realized, maybe I don't want to be there. I saw people who are rampant creators like Kenton Epper. Is very open with the struggles that he has with being a creator in an environment where his creations aren't necessarily respected at the level that they might be. I've met John Cornelius. He's in San Antonio. And John Cornelius has pulled way back on his desire to create and share because...
Yeah, I mean, Howard Hale, stopped creating and now he's working at a woodcraft store or something.
Yeah. And
that guy was
it caused me to examine, why is it that I think that I need to do that? I mean, I guess if someone comes to me and says, hey, Chris, we really are interested in this thing you do. Can you teach us that? Okay, sure, I'd be open to that. But the idea of, okay, I'm going to sit here and think about something I can sell, that's not the right mode for me.
Well, that's not exactly what happens either. I mean, some of the new guys, yes, that's what happens. Some of the older guys, we're
in that mode, yeah.
Well, but I mean, in some of the older guys, that stuff I read, they're not recording the stuff because they want to make money, because there is no damn money in it.
Sure. Now, for the purpose of archiving and I hate to see information go away. To me, the internet and the digital age, and the fact that all of these public domain books are getting digitized and made available, so that I can find all kinds of stuff, I think that's beautiful. And
but I also got a problem with that. It takes out of the, like in the case of some of the Robert Nelson stuff, there was something about hunting down the early Robert Nelson stuff. So you would be one of the few people that even know it existed, and then you'd hunt it down and find it, read it, and learn something. Now they get it, they download the PDF, and they don't read it. So because it's too easily available. You know, there was no skill in hunting that bad boy down at 100 auctions.
Well, and I can appreciate that, but my own personal background has not made me a strong networker with stuff like that. So I didn't have the friend of a friend of a friend who could, give me the mimeograph of this old manuscript. And so for me, those things becoming available, and not just magician texts, but some of the esoteric texts that are coming out, some of the old metaphysical things and that kind of stuff that's becoming more readily available. I think for me that's huge, and for anyone who is seriously looking to increase their knowledge, I cannot see anything bad with that, because that's going to help people to really soak up stuff they never could get any other way. The people that you're talking about, I mean, if you collect it but you don't read it, you didn't get anything out of it anyway.
Yeah, but like one day I was walking around a thrift store, and there's a bunch of books and stuff, and I found these like folded over 8.5 by 11 by 17 little booklets, right? They were early newsletters sent out by one of the early metaphysical organizations. It was so obscure, I didn't even recognize the organization.
Right.
Right. And then I bought them. I bought what I could of them. I looked at everything to make sure I got them all, I took them home and read them, and I was like, this is fabulous shit. And I probably got the only copies alive, and they're not going on the internet.
Think of the benefit, though, that happens eventually. Maybe not right now. I mean, it's okay to hold on to it for a little while. But eventually, wouldn't it be wonderful if that kind of stuff was guaranteed to be preserved by being sort of in the universal archive, as opposed to, whoever deals with your dead body decides to do with that stuff.
Well, I mean, I got some stuff that's one page 8.5 by 11 typed manuscripts from actually 3 or 4 pages. They cost $1,000. From what's known as psychic oracles.
Oh, sure, yeah.
There's information in those, just 3 paragraphs, that a magician would look at and go, this is stupid. Why did you pay $1,000 for this? The information in those, the psychic looks at and goes, oh, my God, dude. It's a different school of thought.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah. And
it's 3 paragraphs. I got one that's like less than a paragraph, and it's like the most mind-blowing shit I've probably ever read. And it was, maybe $100.
There's stuff that maybe people got to be qualified for a little bit, but my core being just hates to see information go away. To me, that's like a book burning, right? I can get that not everybody may get access to it, but gosh, if you're curious, you should be able to connect with everything that you can, if you mean it.
Yeah,
right?
But at the same time, it's like the weird metaphysical experiences. When you're ready for it, the stuff will actually appear to you.
Yeah.
And you'll find out, but you'll find that you'll get a name. You'll get a name, a title maybe. And then you'll start hunting for it, and then, all of a sudden, one day when you're least expecting it, boom, there it is. But there's a part of that journey that you have to take, finding those objects and those works, that's the only way to find that. It's not a question of the money. It's a question of did you take the journey to find the work? If you didn't take the journey to find the work, you're not going to have the work.
Well, that's fair enough. But I would say that overall, I think that the world is benefiting by some of this older stuff, especially, making its
don't get me
way
wrong.
where,
I think
where
some of it's great.
Yeah.
One of the guys I read is Thomas Joseph Brown, and he published, he actually, about, 6 months ago, everything he wrote for Borderlands, he just gave away on a big PDF file. I snatched that up in like 2 seconds, man. But it's also coming from the original guy that wrote it, it's not that, but that stuff is invaluable.
Yeah.
Once you understand, how important they were. But most people will never get why that stuff's even important or why that stuff's interesting or, And
I guess that's what you're touching on. I've been listening to the Psicast driving around for a while. I convert the YouTubes to MP3s and listen to them in the car while I'm driving around. And there was one, I don't remember who you were talking to, but it was talking about being real, knowing your stuff. If you're going to talk about voodoo, you probably need to know something about voodoo. And I guess this all sort of gets into that realm. If you're genuinely interested and you dig in, then you are going to find avenues to go deeper. And as long as you have good introductions to things, it'll kick you in the right place. But if you're not interested, I guess that's what intrigues me. Is I know people that are adamantly against the idea of the paranormal, metaphysical thinking or anything like that. It makes them angry. They're absolutely against the idea of any level of supernatural thinking or as they call it, superstition. And yet they want to drink from that fountain. I don't want you to believe in my reading.
There is the conundrum.
But I need to show you that I can look like I'm reading your mind.
And the point of that is what?
That to me is like someone, violent, saying that they're opposed to violence that does a lot of violent movies.
What I find interesting about that is Joseph Dunninger once said, nobody wants to see a fake mind reader.
Sure.
And then he goes down and he says all the mind readers fake. The fuck is that? Yeah, what is that? Pick a side, fool.
Well, and I can't help but feel that anybody that really opens that door, they're going to have those odd little moments.
Yeah. Because that's the moment of wonder, baby. That's what we're looking for.
Exercises. When we were doing my universe creation, I had sort of 3 realms. There was Magic Chris. He was still doing the sponge bunnies and stuff. There was Psychic Chris. This was sort of moving in the mind reading area, but still, being moderately mainstream. And then there was Soul Ravencraft. And so I'm on this trip, and I'm talking to my buddy on the phone. He was good at just asking crazy questions. And so he was asking me different questions, and how do each one of these versions of me encounter this thing? And one of the ones that he asked, that I still remember very vividly, he said, so what happens when these guys meet James Randi? And I thought, okay, well, Magic Chris, he grew up sort of admiring Randy. He'd probably be a little starstruck, and would just love the opportunity to sit down and talk and listen to the story. Psychic Chris might feel a little sad. Wanted to try and get past this barrier, but not really sure how, and just knowing he was kind of outclassed with that. And he said, what about Saul? And I thought about it for a moment, and I went, Saul would sit down with him, and he would just keep the conversation going. Every time it seemed like Randy was gonna wind down or get suspicious of where Saul was coming from, he'd ask just the right question to keep it going, and just let everything get out there, all of the anger, all the frustration, all of everything, and he'd just keep buying the good scotch. And finally, at the end, when it was time to close down, he'd bid Randy farewell and wish him good luck on all his endeavors, and quietly send him a little something to follow him home. Because, if Randy had this experience in the middle of the night, he couldn't tell anyone. No one would believe it. And I think that was the moment that I realized where I was headed, and my ability to sort of embrace not the darkness necessarily, although there's darkness in there, but just completely letting go of that need to know, to be in charge of it, and to be a lot more open to the possibilities.
Because the possibilities change. I mean, even, what you're thinking now, in a year from now, it can be completely different.
Sure. But hopefully driven by experiences.
Yeah, but it's going to be, it's an interesting journey, though. The whole journey is just fascinating for performance.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Tom Jorgensen on last week. Yeah, last week. Yeah.
I have not had a chance to listen to that one yet. I've got it, but I haven't listened to it yet.
Well, he worked since '61. Retired a couple years ago, and that was basically his first interview of any kind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he was just pouring it out. But I mean, it's an interesting approach, though. Big fair worker or carnival type, atmosphere things that he was doing. Just fascinating stuff. Because those are the venues that a lot of people are never going to be able to experience because they're going away. So in a way, what we're trying to do is preserve this knowledge from various performers' point of view. That, at least leave some kind of archive behind.
Well, yeah, no. And it's interesting talking about the sort of Carney experience. Growing up, magic and sort of Carney stuff was always very intermingled in the people that I connected with. And I'm not necessarily wired to be a Carney. That's just not how I connect with things. I'm fascinated by it. I'm intrigued by it. I'm interested in it. But I also recognize that I am not that. And it's been interesting to me that as much as I've been connecting with the things that I should be doing, that I'm also identifying clearly the things that I don't connect with, and that's okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, I
definitely want to hear Jorgensen's stuff, but I also know that I'm probably not gonna. I'm going to enjoy it, but not absorb it, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, I own a lot of Tom's work. I mean, over the years he's published, and he's published for a long time. And I love his thinking on things, because it's different than mine. But yet there's some similarities there that I think are just fascinating.
Sure.
Like his new work, Journey to Atlantis, I think is what it's called. It's a past life seminar type thing. It's brilliant.
Okay. All right. So
his work on Georgia Magnet was extraordinary.
Sure.
And he talks about all those in the program, plus doing illustrations for Topps magazine. Just fascinating stuff,
Yeah. Well, I know that I'll enjoy it. Absolutely. But I think it's okay to. I mean, I remember when I was first getting involved in magic and anything like that. Anyone that I saw immediately went sort of into my head, and it made me very bipolar as a performer.
Yeah, magic does have that tendency to do that. I mean, you got to figure out, at some point you figure out, what is it I want to do? Do I want to do sponge bunnies or do I want to do seances?
Well, and I think one of the greatest moments in your journey is when you see someone do something and you go, I don't need to know how that works.
Yep,
there
it is.
I don't want to know. That's beautiful, and I love the way they do that, and I just don't need to know.
Yep. I mean, there's things that a friend of ours in Vegas, George, did. We don't want to know how they're done.
Yeah.
But, you know, our mind's saying we need to know how this is done. But reality,
right.
I don't need to know how it's done. It's incredible.
And I think that's a good thing when you can encounter something, you go, I don't need to buy that. I don't need to learn that. I don't need to do that. I can just enjoy it. Because
there's a couple of effects. There is a couple of effects that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't want to know how they're actually done. I mean, I got my suspicions how they're done, but I don't really want to know.
Yeah.
Because I set that limit for myself after I started learning everything. I said, there are some things I need not to know.
Well, and I think in the beginning, you do need to expose yourself to as much as possible. There's a reason why you had that voracious appetite in the beginning, because that's part of the journey is to learn what all is possible and what all you might do. And if you only learn one song, right, you don't learn all the rest of the music. You don't know what might draw you in. But I think that the next threshold there is when you begin to kind of settle down.
But and you need to know a lot of things. I mean, you need to know some psychology, some philosophy. You know, you need to study everything, really, but you don't need to know everything in those fields.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I also think that there's something very powerful in being able to reinvent yourself. We're talking about Andruzzi, you know, being Tom Palmer, then Masculine the Mage, and then Tony Andruzzi, and we do have the ability. I mean, I've sort of played around with how to change people's perspective on who I was, and it takes maybe about 6 months of being consistently on a different mode, and people sort of forget what your other mode was.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at a point, yeah. I mean, it can be done quicker. They don't know you, but yeah.
Right, but if you decide that you want to be something different, you can be something different. You can just decide, and you can begin to make that change, and set that other stuff aside and pick up the new stuff. And I think that's wonderful. I think also as a performer, we have this beautiful ability to wear more than one mask. Characters are a wonderful way to explore different versions of things. I do, in the background, have a character named Professor Marvel, named after the Wizard of Oz character.
Yep.
And he is my mainstream kids magician. Now, I barely ever do anything with him, right? Because that's just not my world. But every once in a while, I have a connection with someone that is genuinely interested in that. They're genuinely interested in me participating in that, and it feels right. And so Professor Marvel has different clothes, different name, different mode, and I can put him on when I need to. But
yeah, because it's fun to become Professor Marvel for a day.
Yeah.
But you don't want to live in Professor Marvel's world for too long.
That's right. About 90 minutes tops. But I think that's one thing that some people who are getting going in this performance world is that we've gotten very accustomed to performers who have. Michael Amar had a great way of explaining that your magician character can basically be you turned up to 11, and that you can make it very much yourself. You don't have to become somebody completely different, and I think a lot of people embrace that. But I think there's also something wonderful in taking on that full theatrical mode and saying, no, I want to be someone completely different. And I want this to be a part. I want this to be a character, and I'm going to do it for a little while, then I'm going to stop. And I can have more than one of them. I don't have to be just one thing. Specialization is for insects.
Well, plus there's something about the more you can actually do, the more venues you have to work, which is always a nice thought.
Yeah. I think also that what happens is people, if you only do one thing, that's why I think getting involved in other kinds of theater is good. Taking on a role and just being an actor, just playing a part, that reminds you that you can do that. And it helps you build the skill to be able to do that. And when you know that's a tool in your toolbox, it makes it very easy for you to go, okay, well, for this thing, I'm going to be another actor. I'm going to be another character. And I think in the right kind of show, you can even take on other characters. I mean, look at Max Howard and his ability to make each piece in a show its own setting, its own piece. And we got people outside of the magic world that's their regular deal. Look at Carol Burnett. Look at Tracy Ullman. Look at Sid Caesar. All these people that engaged Monty Python, right? The sketch comedy, where the whole thing was, for this bit, I'm going to be this person. I mean, that's an amazing tool to use in creating experiences for people, if that's the kind of show that you're doing.
Yeah.
Use more of that in some ways.
It is a lot of fun to explore those different venues, to see if that's for you,
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, I was a mime. Fairly good one, too.
Oh, yeah? Did you wear the stripy shirt?
Oh, yeah, the old mime deal. We got a picture when I was like 10 or 11.
We got to put that up on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, probably, eventually. But the clown photos have been burned.
We'll find that buried with your old manuscripts.
Yeah, the clown photos have been... No, I got it. I'm in the gas station.
Oh,
so keep talking.
You got to be somewhere.
Well, I walk around when I do these things, so,
I understand.
Gets me out of the office.
Well, Robert's been really quiet this whole time.
Robert's always
Has
quiet.
Has he gone to sleep? Yeah?
I'm a great listener, so.
Yeah. So have we sparked anything for you, or are you kind of gritting your teeth or nodding your head, or any questions, thoughts come up for you out of all this?
Right here. No, I was just going to say that I wanted to bring up something you mentioned earlier, is that when the thing is that, a lot of these mentalists learn from, like stuff about cold reading or psychic readings from a skeptical point of view, and which is the wrong way to go, because what they're learning is just complete BS. And I think that they should really go for the true sources of doing, like, readings and reading up on certain different phenomena and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I guess one of the more shocking things for me as I started to embrace all this is that some of this stuff is not a trick.
Right.
It's not a trick. You're doing something. And if you're uncomfortable with that idea, again, maybe you need to be doing something else. But on the other side of that revelation, I mean, when I first started getting into the idea of doing readings and that kind of thing, I read all of the cold reading kinds of concepts. I memorized the 12 statements and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I quit trying to fake it that stuff really began to happen. And now I'm sort of in this mode where the readings that I do are it's kind of it's got its own reality, right? And
let me jump in for a second because I got to mention something.
Yeah.
So you go through and you read like Herb Dewey, right? We start with cold reading on Herb Dewey. And then you go to, what is it, Larry Becker's 132 words or whatever it is, a little paragraph.
Yeah.
When he's doing palm reading. Now, okay, compare the two together, right? Herb Dewey's interesting, okay? But what Becker's actually done there is actually quite genius. It does work. I've used it. I wouldn't recommend it these days, but, I mean, it is as good as he says it is. It was on, I think, audio cassette originally when I heard it. I mean, it was decades ago, but I think it might be available on CD at some point. But it really is a really interesting kind of approach to doing the whole reading kind of concept. Now, it's certainly not the only way to do a reading, you know? You know the one I'm talking about, the 132-word paragraph.
Right, yeah. And
it's a beautiful piece. As a piece of work, it is absolutely astounding.
But I'll tell you, I'll give you an example of sort of another mode that I find myself in now. I mean, I know that information is buried in here somewhere. It's part of my mental primordial stew there, but I don't consciously work with it anymore. I was doing a corporate event. I was doing basically palm and eye readings for people. Right. Set up my tent, and my main goal is I want to just keep them moving, which I hate doing that. Just say something, get you out of here. Let's get someone else in here. I really like to take time with that, but I'm developing modes to be able to keep things active and get people in and out. So I had this one guy. It was toward the end of the evening. Guy had a British accent. And he sat down, and he's like, okay, go ahead and go for it. Well, so I'm just dealing with some elemental energy, elemental shape of the hand, and a few things, a few little things like that, dealing with some lines, not fundamental things at all. Right. And so I said, okay, well, so this is what you are, and this is what I'm seeing here, and I see signs of this. And he went, okay, wait a minute. Wait, okay, where do you see that? And I showed him. And he said, okay, all right. And I continued, and I told him something else. Okay, wait. Where do you see that? And he said everything I was saying was correct, but he was trying to understand how I was getting this. And what I was doing was I was reading his palm. I was looking at the shape of his hand. I was looking at the lines of the hand. I wasn't trying to Sherlock Holmes his shoes or anything like that. I was reading his palm because I read people's palms. And it was interesting to have that mode where it's like, wait, because he knew that I was using psychology or something like that. And he said, show me where that is. I showed him. And that is a whole other realm of this experience that I learned by getting involved and by doing it and studying the more esoteric sides of it instead of just trying to be a cold reader. That I would if I was talking to myself a few years ago before I went on this journey, I would not believe myself. And that's what you were talking about, though. I mean, you got to go through you got to earn certain pieces of the journey. But to me, it's interesting how when you really get into the esoterics, along with keeping up with psychology and that kind of thing, and then you just let it go, and you just do it. that takes you in a place that people didn't tell me about. I love it. I love it. But it doesn't sound rational. You know,
right?
The stuff just works.
Yeah, right. I mean, it reminds me of what Richard Osterlin said in one of his lectures. Well, all of them, but the first time I heard it was when I was down there at his Penguin Live lecture, and he mentioned that when he does a spoon bending routine, he acts like and imagine it that he's doing it for real. And that was a big revelation, because if Millis would only try to, pick up on that, just, to have that certain mind frame, that certain thing where, like, they look at it like everything they're doing is real, then their performance will definitely go up, and it's worked for me.
But you have to actually try to do it for real,
right?
You can't know what it's like until you actually try to bend a spoon with your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You can't imagine what it's like to try to bend a spoon with your mind, because it's just stupid.
Right.
And until you actually allow yourself to run with that first idea that pops into your head. Okay, so I know what the person's name is. Okay, last night, the thing I was doing, I knew the person's name was Hillary. She'd written sister, so it's her sister Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first thing I try to do is open myself up to what element am I feeling around this name.
Uh-huh.
Air was first thing popped into my head. So I said, I'm not feeling like a movie star or anything like that. Okay, I know it's her sister. Okay, it's not a name that I recognize, so that's good ground there. This feels more personal to you. This feels kind of like family. I'm getting so that's all stuff that I've got. That's in my pocket. I know that's all right. All right. Now it's time to just open myself up. Air was the feeling that I was getting. So I'm feeling air energy around this person. A little bit of chaos with this person. Very difficult for them to settle. Everything's shiny for them. Lot of motion, a lot of movement, a lot of curiosity there. And that was all dead on. And we ended up talking after the show about her sister's situation and some of that kind of thing, and how that energy was creating a challenge for her. Because she was trying to fight it and be something else. Mm-hmm. And so when I got the name, okay, the name is great, but this other stuff that was a strong connection, that wasn't out of the cold reading statements or anything like that. I just try to go, what am I feeling? And I run with it. And if it's right, it ends up being really right. And when it's wrong, it sort of doesn't matter. And that ability, that willingness to I mean, this stuff isn't a card trick where you go, is this your thought? Right? That doesn't matter. It's all this weird little in-between stuff, and that's, for me, what I consider gray, because those are the points where I'm really trying to do this. I'm okay, I've got the information, but what does this information make me feel? What does this information mean? Why did they think of this instead of something else? What does this mean? And I try to completely open myself to go for it. And what I find is the more I try to go for it, the more I hit and the more those connections happen.
And see, that's the stuff I've been studying for 30 years.
That's awesome.
Right.
And I heard you say it. I heard Richard Webster say it. I heard Bob Cassidy say it. I hear Richard Osterlin say it. Everybody's saying it. And you hear it over and over in different ways. And it's
so once you do it and actually see it, then you go, that's what we're talking about.
Right. But I tell you, the person that really got me to try and decide what that meant was that psychic I interviewed on the Shadow Hour that said, you don't edit. And now when I talk to people about the mentalism, and how I connect with things and all that, I've got this whole area of things to talk about: how we edit our thoughts and how you try not to edit your thoughts before you do this kind of thing. And that's all real stuff.
Right, because there are certain times, I mean, when people actually would try this, there are times when in my performances where I would be in a certain state. It's like a phenomenon where for like, I would say for like, like a 10, 20 seconds, I'm like tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and I'm like, and I'm just picking up on like really like thoughts and flashes of intuition regarding the other people around me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like like there's like that hidden talent that's ready to to come out.
And I think that this is something that humans do. But
absolutely.
But we're really disconnected from it nowadays. And so for me, I mean, I'm kind of, and I have a part of my world where I'm full on metaphysical stuff. I know you know what I'm talking about, Bill. I suspect that Mr. Marcy does too, but I haven't heard as much about his shady practices that I ever have about Bill's, because Bill and I have talked about this stuff. But I'm a wizard, man. I do that stuff. And it's a real thing for me. But then on the performance side, when I'm doing shows, I try to leave that door open. And if you will leave that door open, cool stuff can happen. And if you don't run away from it, if you don't freak out, and if you don't try to cut it off, oh my God, something's happening, quick, do a joke. If you really leave yourself open to the experience, you're gonna connect, and some really interesting things are gonna happen, and something will change, and
right.
And I think that's wonderful. That for me is wonderful. Not everybody's ready for it, but man, if you can get there, that's a real transformation.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not about believing your own press. Right? It's not about becoming delusional. It's about connecting and manifesting.
Mhm.
And I mean, what more do you want?
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing you should aim for as a performer. Because like I said, once you start putting that into practice, and now I see what Bill's been talking about and Richard Oswald, it's like, you get those flashes of real intuition. It's like, holy cheese,
Yeah. But I think one of the big issues, and this is something that in magician culture, we struggle with as you get further out of that, is less of it, but it's still around. Okay, yeah, there are some fortune tellers that are just trying to rip you off. I remember a reading I got from somebody. I went in, was going to do the $10 special. She said, "Well, no, you don't want that." Why not? Because that's no good. Won't tell you anything. All right. Well, what should I get? How much money do you have? Well, she wanted me to do the $50 reading. I didn't have $50. We determined that I had $30, and she could do something for that. So she did a little reading, and it wasn't looking so good. And then she said, there's more stuff I can tell you. Things you need to know about your life and your love and your career. But you got to give me more money. You got to go get more. And I was like, well, no, thank you. I think I've learned everything that I need to here. And I left just completely disgusted. I knew right there I was never going to do that. I was never going to, if I felt like I had some connection that someone needed to know, I was not going to go, sorry, good luck with that, you don't have enough money. You know, that's just, and maybe that makes me a lousy businessman. But to me, if you're really connecting, then you got to do it, and you know, pay it forward. And I've been very satisfied with that. But I've since then connected with a lot of people who are, you know, so-called shut-eye readers. That you know, they're really into it, and they do have a kindness, and they do have a caring for their clients, and they really are trying to help. And yes, there are some dastardly people that use people's metaphysical interests and beliefs against them. And there are a lot of people that are very loving and have a genuine desire to make a difference for people. And you can't put them all in the same pan together. You have to see those. You know, there are some bastard lawyers, and there are some life-saving lawyers. When you need a lawyer, you know, that's a good thing, right? And it's the same with this. And you know, I think we got to keep our arrogance in check with some of this, and we also have to be careful about how we train new people into becoming arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing can be said about medical doctors. I mean, you got really good medical doctors, and you got some real sleazy ones. I mean, I heard that there are some countries in Europe where medical doctors do the same thing as the scumbag psychics, where it's like, you know, if you give me this much money, then I'll help you. If you don't, well, too bad. So so it works, you know. So it goes both ways.
And the decision I made early on, this may sound corny to some people, but I decided in everything that I was doing, I was going to do it all through love. That's it. You know, that when I'm doing something with someone, and especially if we're going to get into an area that is potentially, you know, more difficult, more challenging, that my goal is to do it through love. And then I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to manipulate them or anything like that. I'm trying to create this context, this experience where something can happen that will matter, and that I'm not there to win. And I think that in anything like this that you do, if you do it through love, if you treat the person like someone that you genuinely care about, they're not marks, right? They're not suckers. They're human beings that have, for whatever reason, connected with you for this thing. And whether it's a show or whether it's something else, you should be honorable about it. And I think that if you do that, if you have that attitude, and you put yourself at least beside them, if not putting them in front of you, then you're going to be all right. It doesn't mean you won't ever say something stupid, right? It doesn't mean that you won't ever, but we do that with our family and friends,
right?
But we care about the outcome, and we do what we can to make it the way it needs to be, even if we have to set ourselves aside, you know. And I think that's that core thing in my head is what helps keep me balanced on it. It really bothers me that a lot of performers in our industry still talk about the people that they work with as though they were some sort of inferior being. Right. I don't like that. I don't agree with it. It's not the way I'm wired.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's like if you approach it from an ethical viewpoint, then you're going to feel much better that way, as opposed to if you're going to try to con someone out of their hard-earned money.
But ethics is something we treat like we can codify.
Mm-hmm.
What are the rules for the ethics? And what I'm hoping to do, not to put that down or anything, but what I'm hoping to do is to get the rules out of my head, not worry about the rules as much as I'm worried about this connection here, and really doing what is right, not what's supposed to be right, because as you know, that can be variable. Some people need a punch in the mouth.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes I need one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always like to give more than what they pay for, and like for example, like if I'm doing my stage hypnosis show, and I get volunteers to come up, they're going to have fun, and their friends are going to laugh with them and everything. But for coming up and volunteering, I'm going to make sure I'm going to give them a hypnotic gift that they'll be able to take with them. So
right,
it's
right.
way of saying,
which is usually the same gift that he's selling in the back of the room later after the show. But
right. Now, giving is part of that love equation, right? We have to be willing to give.
Right. Right, exactly.
So I'm trying to picture in my head someone listening to our little conversational journey here. We've gone in all kinds of different directions, and what the takeaway is from our conversation.
Well, that's supposed to have a will.
What are you all taking away from this so far?
Well,
I'm sorry, I was sending a product.
So inspiration.
Well, no, for me, it's not about if I find anything or anything or not, but there's a concept that we need to archive. Like I said earlier, different styles of performance, right? I mean, because if we don't, everybody's going to still think like James Randi, which is fucked.
Sure. Well,
because the founder of that group admitted they never did any research on multiple occasions. So this is the scientific investigation. They did no investigation. So, I don't want people to keep thinking that way, because that way is destructive. It fits into this whole agenda that they were pushing. Maybe that's not the right agenda. In fact, that agenda is mostly a lie.
What happens is...
No, I'm not saying not be skeptical, but, do your own research on it.
Well, there's also a lot of value in encountering a version of something in its own context.
Have you seen James Randi bend a spoon?
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, looking at Marx Brothers movie, all right, I grew up watching Marx Brothers movies. I love the Marx Brothers. I read biographies on Groucho and that kind of thing. I found out that during some of their movies, all of the work they did, they took the shows on the road. They had stenographers helping to capture all the good ad-libs. They had people timing laughs to find out what the best way to tell jokes were. They really honed that thing so that when we went to film it, they knew exactly the way it was going to go. So you watch a Marx Brothers movie and it feels a little slow sometimes. I watched the Marx Brothers movie in an audience at a theater, one of our local movie theaters. Our local theaters will do old movies in the Paramount there, and it was a Marx Brothers double feature, right? And I'm there with my family. I'm there with my little daughter. I think she was like 6, 7 at the time. And
these are big screen film copies.
Huh?
These are big screen film copies, right?
Right. So we're watching it, sitting in a fancy theater, watching it on a screen, and what you find is that all that slowness that you felt when you were watching it by yourself on television, the audience gets into the movie. They start laughing, and there's a good joke that happens. And the guys on screen are waiting for the audience to stop laughing before they give you the next joke, because they knew how long that laugh was going to be. And I mean, it was beautiful, and I laughed at the whole movie. It was hilarious. I mean, it was a movie I'd seen before, but I'd never felt it with that other energy.
Right.
And God, they really knew what they were doing. And watching the Marx Brothers on television is nothing like watching it in a theater full of people. And
there is an immense difference watching old films in the original format in a theater. Remember when the Casablanca did the 75th? They actually showed original copy, or actual 4x3 copies of the movie in the theater. Yeah. I actually went. We actually got seats. We were pretty lucky. It was packed.
Well, and when we look at these different styles of
on a big screen, it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's not even, I've seen it 100 times on video and stuff. It's not even the same. It's not even the same film on video. When you see that stuff live,
and imagine what it would be like to watch a Magic Lantern show in the way it was actually presented in the 19th century.
A little dry.
Well,
but it is still interesting.
I think that if I were to put on a Magic Lantern show with that technology, I wouldn't just show the slides. There would be other stuff going on. There would be, some kind of music going on. There would be some kind of narration or something going on. I've seen little suggestions that kind of thing actually happens.
Well, yeah, because even in the silent films, what you don't see on the silent films, they had a guy playing piano.
Right.
They have piano scores for those movies, so there is music there's sound accompanying the movie, the silent film. It's not actually silent. That's a weird one.
And imagine getting to see like Grand Guignol Theater on the French stage back in the day. There's so many things like that people have experienced that we don't really get to experience the right way because we think we know what it is.
Yeah, I saw an old one of those old lantern shows of the Oddfellows. The problem is we're watching it in an Oddfellows lot, so it had some surroundings. However, it wasn't connected to any of the ritual stuff. It was just a auction sale. It was still interesting, I mean, from that aspect. I think I threw a few bids at it. Because it was a fairly scarce piece to begin with, but can you imagine? I was trying to envision it in the sense of, a guy riding the toy goat and wearing the weird masks and the whole more esoteric version of it, where those magic slides at that time would really be highly impactful. Instead of
and they're still impactful today. They're still impactful today if you create the right conditions.
And I think the Magic Lantern show could work, but it's got to be done. It's got to be venue selected. I mean, it's like installation art. It has to be set for a particular venue because the sound of the venue is one way, the echoes in the venue are another way. Everything's going to play together to create this very unique experience, which is rather hard to do. Most guys just want to learn the trick and not actually learn the whole performance setup of it.
Right.
Why is this? It needs to be done in like almost like a museum where, people are coming to see this thing, are coming to see it for its historical interest, improper costuming, and, give them the experience.
Well, and for some of these things, these aren't necessarily things that I would necessarily look to recreate myself, but I want to experience what they're like so that they're in my head, and that I know what's possible, and I know what things feel like, and that's why for me it's very important. I think anybody trying to do a creative art Yeah, like Stephen King said, go experience other versions. Go experience things outside.
Yeah, this is interesting because once we get away from the magic lantern, we get into something known as a stereoscope with the moving pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's just a round object that spins around with moving pictures, it is still quite a remarkable device.
Yeah.
Because there's something magical there. There's actually something going on there, and then we get into early film. The earliest films are like 10, 15 seconds or 15 minutes out of France. They're extraordinary pieces of work.
Well, and when you see someone work something like that who knows what they're doing, right now when I do my Vault of Horror once a month, I do sort of a hosted horror movie at a local venue, and I cut the movie into reels, so that the interactive portion happens while they're changing the reel, and of course I'm creating all this digitally. But in doing that, I had to learn a little bit about what header and tail leaders were like and what they were for and when the cigarette burn occurred and all that kind of thing. And I got to learn something about how these guys ran these projectors. And that was a skill.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys...
Yeah, they were working, man. When they were doing the 7-plexes and they were running from screen to screen, they're running hard all day long changing reel. It's not like, that's an easy job, sit up in the hole and do nothing. Yeah. No.
Yeah. And all of performance history in all its forms has versions of that, where you look at it from our sort of jaded modern perspective, where we clearly are the most sophisticated society that has ever been. Right? We're as good as it's ever been. And you look back at what some of these people accomplished, and you just go, man, how could you do that?
Oh, yeah.
But you absorb that, and it gets back in your head as to what's possible.
Yeah, I had a buddy, I don't know, he's dead now, a couple decades ago, that restored old celluloid acetate. That's what he was a film restorer. He restored silent film copies and for archival purposes and stuff. Really interesting work. But he said,
Yeah.
I'm looking at this thing and I got, a million frames on this film, and I got to go through each and every frame to make sure it's flawless. Because he's splicing back together pieces from several different films that are all burned up, and some of that cellulose acetate would just explode and catch on fire. And that's why they were trying to preserve the knowledge, and it was really a skill.
Sure.
It was like you got to be out of your goddamn mind to do some of this. 24 frames a second,
having an appreciation for that.
Yeah, 60 times 60. That's a minute of film, and you got
having an appreciation for that gives you a wonderful advantage as a storyteller and as an experience creator if you're going to touch with that world at all. What you've learned about restoring film and dealing with film and all that qualifies you to imagine what it would be like to be someone who did that back in the day. And at some point, that could be useful. And that's going to
that's why I said learn everything. Learn a little bit of everything. I think for let's say the magic collector, right? The most important thing you can learn is paper conservation.
Yeah.
How to conserve the instructions, because some of these instructions are printed on the most acidic paper that was ever made. Well, I got one from a rare magic effect. The thing's disintegrate. You open it and it disintegrates. Well, I learned how to humidify paper, which is kind of a cool trick. So you can unfold it, and help preserve it a little bit. But it's still, even then, it's still risky to open it up. But it's better than trying to open it up dry.
Yeah.
But, there's certain things that I think everybody should know how to do.
Sure. I don't disagree with that at all.
It's not that we're, let's say I went to the auction, I bought the thing because I know I can get, $650 out of it, and I paid $20. Okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But while it's in your care, you need to properly maintain it so you can get to the other guy. Who's going to archive it and save it for the next generation? You know, the unique thing about magic, I'd say magic in general, just as a collection, this stuff was really, the only reason it came down to us is because of the collectors and dealers. You know, the brick and mortar magic shops. I mean, that's what preserved this entire genre. And then the guys bought it and they put it away and they kept it and they collected this stuff. And it was because of the collectors we still have examples of what Raymond's posters look like.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to have to come up with other modes for that. And I think it's okay that we find other modes.
I mean, we are going to have to update our archival methods, but we're going to have to update how we catalog this information. But the fact that it's still available is interesting. When you can go buy an early Davenport piece that was made in 1910.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and just what you learn by looking at how they screw and glue those things together.
Really well.
It's just a whole other view of how things are assembled.
Well, a lot of guys right now are collecting Magico from Japan because most of that stuff that was in Japan got destroyed during the flood, the tsunami. You know, so the stuff that got out is now as equally as valuable as some of the Tenyu stuff, and it's all fairly scarce. I mean, it does exist. You can find it. It's like Supreme Magic. You can find it. You know, it's out there. But some of it is quite rare, and I think some of it needs to be preserved, or at least held back for a while. And, preserved for a while to see if it's, what it is, because it was really fairly well made. I mean, I actually had a few pieces and sold them years ago, but I'm changing my collection all the time. So,
sure.
But I think, there's the core collection, and there's other parts of the collection that get changed up, because I get tired of looking at stuff. And then, okay, maybe it's time to pass this knowledge on to somebody else. I have David Hoy's Super Psychic Dice, so it's one of his back-of-room products. It's up for sale now, along with a signed copy of, actually signed by Dr. Faust, as Dr. Faust, his book, which is quite rare because David Hoy did not like magicians. And he actually signed it to a magic collector, one of the big magic collectors.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting story in itself. But, these things, I think, need to be, the whole genre needs a different way to preserve, and that's why we're doing the Psicast. Because we're preserving and sharing some of this rather unique information that maybe wasn't good enough to sell, or, whatever, or maybe some of it was good enough to sell. Like Tim gave away a couple pieces the other week that were, you could have sold those, bro. You could have bought that up and sold it.
I think that to me is the whole takeaway from our conversation, is that especially someone involved in the more esoteric version of our arts needs to be open to a lot of stuff, be curious about a lot of stuff, and be willing to explore a little bit instead of just taking everything at face value or assuming that you know what you need or know what things are. I have one quote I'd like to share, and then I should probably shift gears here because I know we've been on for a while together.
A couple hours. The Psicast doesn't have a time limit, so we're not like the hour thing. We usually go a couple hours. We try to get at least an hour, but it could go 3. Whatever. If it's interesting, we go with it. Because we're in the moment.
Well,
I
do have some family waving dinner at me with a scowl on their face. So I should probably shift gears for that so that I...
and that's the time to end.
But I do want to share...
And Robert wrap us up.
Well, hang on. I want to share this quote first because this to me is what sort of encompasses everything here. This is from Robert Heinlein. He's a science fiction author that you may be familiar with. It's from his book Time Enough for Love, and it's one of my favorite paragraphs he's ever written. He says a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects.
Nice. Well,
Robert, wrap us up.
All right. Well, special thanks to Chris Walden for being our guest today in this episode of Psicast, and we will see you guys at the next podcast. So until then, we'll see you later.